Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. Let's have a honest talk about race and racism within the Christian church. Look, a white point of view or a black point of view is unacceptable in God's eyes. So let's talk about it. Listen, before I get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or a comment, and especially with this subject, all comments are welcome. Well, I have been thinking about talking about race, and oftentimes I talk about it on my first Facebook page. I recently have come to the conclusion that I'm no longer going to comment on other people's posts because they become too contentious. Rarely do you get the truth out of people, and rarely do you get a good dialogue without people getting offended, getting upset, getting insulted, start insulting you. On an average, the people who unfriend me, block me, and whatever it is you do you can remove a person from your Facebook existence. On an average, the people who do that the most to me are evangelical white people. And the two main reasons why they do that, block me, get to the point where they block me, the two main reasons is usually Trump. My opinions that I voice on Trump, and that or race. And when I say race, their defense of the white race. In other words, they get tired of me talking about race. And when I challenge their defense of their whiteness, they eventually end up getting upset. Okay. So those are the two common reasons. Okay, and those are the most people who block me. And Christians, by the way, all Christians. It's amazing because I'll have better conversations with atheists, believe it or not, than sometimes with Christians. All right. But the problem, of course, with this whole issue of race and racism in the church, it's always a trigger. It's a trigger point for people. As I said, people who block me the most will get triggered by a post I make. For example, here's a post that I made that triggered someone. He was, excuse me, he said, question. If God cursed Ham's seed with dark skin and slavery, what color was Noah and his 3 sons? Now this is an example that triggered someone that responded. People did respond different ways, but one particular guy ended up asking me on his radio show, but he did respond, and I thought it was kind of kind of shocking for him, but because he had the radio show with a Christian. But one of his statements was Canaan was cursed, but regardless, Ham's descendants were dark skinned. I think Africa proved that out. Now he goes on, and we kind of get into this back and forth. And as I went on his radio show, then again, it began to be clear. And remember I said in the heading, a white point of view or a black point of view is unacceptable with God. And this is one of the problems that you have. What I see with his response and with people who get triggered by a post like that is their white point of view. Now, at the same time, we're going to get into black point of view. But as I said, the people who block me the most are those who are defending their white point of view. In other words, they see the world through the lens of their race, the white race, the American culture. And basically, they get triggered now. And this has been going on for ages. This is why I want to have a deep talk about this. So the next several videos, I really want to get into it. And I'm really going to get into this and point out some resources that you can avail yourself of. But why is there racism in the church? especially in 2020. Now, oftentimes it's masked. Like I say, this response here reveals his, again, white point of view, what he thinks about race, how America, white evangelicals think about race. And it's it's a fascinating study, but it's also disheartening. In my own experience, one of the things that I wrote a novel, as you can see right here. I wrote my first novel, The Color of Redemption, and this was inspired by a conversation I had with a pastor in my area where I live at, and we had lunch, and I thought at first it was sort of a friendly lunch, in that he was wanting to get to know me as a new member of his church. But I kind of find out, it seemed like later he wanted to more like spy out who I was. What kind of person is this? And one of the things that came up in this conversation, and by the way, these conversations always go the same way. And this is why, again, I want to talk about it, because the markers are so clear. But he began to talk and say that I don't know how we got on. I don't know exactly how we got on the subject of race. I don't remember really. But one of the things he began to say was that he didn't understand why race was an issue. After all, and again, this is the common part of what you see in people today, white evangelicals. And I'll do the disclaimer and say some, but white evangelicals, where they would say, and this is what he said. He said, well, after all, slavery is ancient history. My grandparents came over on the boat, immigrated from, whatever the European countries. We had nothing to do with slavery. So why are we made to talk about slavery? And then, wait a minute, and then the conversation even got better, or I should say, it progressed or degressed. Then he said, his church was in a particular city that I knew, not too far from where I live. And I do know that that the city began to increase in the black population. There were those that, and so in this particular church city, it was an old Dutch Reformed city. There was a church on every corner. Now, in the hood, we used to talk about churches on every corner, but they were storefront churches. But these were churches that sat on an acre, half an acre, fourth an acre, but in every corner. And it was a kind of a really old, it was even a dry city. In other words, on Sundays, most of the business was closed. They didn't sell liquor. But when blacks started moving in to this city, obviously you have the white flight. What was more astounding is that the churches fled faster than the white flight. Okay. And he was one of them. And so they moved 25 miles to the west to a budding white flight city. And I was and he said that is the reason why they moved the church, because of the black population that was increasing in this city. Now think about it. This is a church that's fleeing. A church. And then to crown us all off with a cherry, he said, but we try to get a black pastor to take over. Now, I did respond to him. I said, well, it's amazing, because if I had been in the church at that point, you would have left me. Right? You would have moved away from me. Now think about that. The Church of Jesus Christ. And what was some of the shocking, to me, that's always shocking, it shouldn't be, is the racial attitudes in favor of one's own race in the Church of Jesus Christ today, 2020. It's not ancient history. So what you kind of have is sometimes an argument, and a lot of these arguments have been crafted by conservative media Fox News, one of the chiefs. And so you hear these talking points over and over, especially when it comes to the issue of reparations. Now, we'll get back to reparations later. What I wanted to just kind of point out is one of the reasons why people, and this gentleman here that invited me on his radio show, we got into a conversation about reparations, and he said, "Well, you're not for that reparations nonsense, are you?" And he was shocked when I go, "Well, yeah, wait a minute, let's talk about what does God think about it?" In other words, when it comes to the subject of race, and here is the interesting thing about race. The reason why they have this attitude, and conservative commentator Ann Coulter once said this, that the O.J. Simpson trial was the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm going to paraphrase it. She basically said that trial, right then and there, said, white people stood up and said, this is the end of white guilt. Close down that bank. Now, what that really means is that a certain segment, conservative rights, racist, bigoted whites, we're tired of this race thing. We're tired of being called racist. In fact, you have people who even say that one of the worst things to be called is a racist. I would say no, the worst thing is to be a racist, because see, to be a racist afflicts a lot of carnage and damage, and it has over the centuries of American history. But where do these thoughts arrive? Where do they come from? Well, first and foremost, in order for you to agree with these sentiments, it has to resonate with you. It has to start with your own racism. And this is one of the problems that I said that we have to kind of unravel. What is more shocking is that it's in the church of Jesus Christ. What is this white point of view? I've had white Christians, and let me give you a little background. This is my introductory video, and again, over the next several videos, we're going to really get into the subject of race. One of the things about Facebook, of course, is, as I said, there are people who get triggered by certain things, right? I get triggered when I see a posting, and I'll respond. People get triggered, okay? And like I say, a lot of white people get triggered. Usually, Fox News, conservative listening, white Christians. And again, I'm dealing with the subject of Christians, by the way. I'm emphasizing that because I'm not dealing with the secular world. We're going to get into the secular world because, unfortunately, racism in some parts of the evangelical world are one and the same. But it's expected, see, with the person who doesn't know Christ. And again, the whole purpose of these discussions that we're going to have is within the Christian church. How in the world does racism exist in the Christian church? And so, with Facebook, I made it a choice not to comment on people's wall anymore, just because it just really doesn't. It's very unfruitful, time consuming, and you get nowhere. And the reason why is because people don't really answer the questions, and people are not really honest in their perspective. But initially I got into responding on Facebook because I began to see, again, white Christians. And I'm talking here about the talk, expressing some views. I would see white Christians who sounded no different than what I was listening to in the world. Now, as a young man growing up, I'm 60 years old. And when I started my adult life in 1980, okay, it was a very racist background. And again, I was a young, immature kid. I grew up in a suburb outside of St. Louis, Missouri. We were the first families on that block. And then blacks started to move in the area. So Of course, I didn't know the racial attitudes at the time. People moving away, people not allowing their children to play with me. Again, for the color of the skin. What I did know is how deep this was in the church. Of course, I wasn't a Christian at the time. When Martin Luther King came to Chicago, and he was surprised at the racism he saw in Chicago. And he was from the Deep South, ground zero for the Civil Rights Movement, Alabama, Montgomery, Georgia, Mississippi. And he said, well, man, these people in Chicago was something. Why were these attitudes there? That's what I want to get into, because see, there's the reason for that. But again, remember, we're going to be dealing with this from a Christian perspective. And so, I'm going to refer a lot to Fox News and conservative news sources because, believe it or not, that is where a lot of the talking points come from. See, that's where the talking points come from. And what you have is that those then talking points are crafted into an argument that resonate within a person's ethnicity, their whiteness, their white point of view. So my point is, where did it come from? And why does it exist in the church? And if you go to an evangelical church today, you're going to see that. You're going to see how that. Now, there was one particular lady that, very good friends, by the way, with this lady. We're very good friends with her. And, but years ago, we were talking. And she has said to me, again, because I said, when you have these conversations, you see how these things unfold. But as we're talking, she was very accommodating. And she, I think, is trying to do the right thing. But we got to talking about, I think she was a member of one of the daughters of the Confederation, maybe. And then she began this, and then she said this. She said, that my ancestors owned slaves. And she said, but we treat our slaves white. And I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, not helping. Now, the reason why I want to bring that story up is because sometime after that, she commented on a Facebook page, a story. She commented on the story. A few years ago, you might remember that a black man flipped out and he was killing Dallas police officers. It was a sniper, okay? And then right before then, there was the story about a guy named Philando Castillo. And Philando Castillo was a man coming home from work. He had his girlfriend and his daughter in the car. Police officer stopped him because he thought he was a burglary suspect. Turned out not to be true. Cop stopped him. Philando said, I just want to let you know I got a gun. 53 seconds later, the cop killed him, shot him. Now, I'm saying these two stories because they collide. This is what she brought up. So in a Facebook post, this is what she said. Police officers want to come home. Okay, fair point. But then she threw this in. She said, well, if a police officer tells you to not reach for something, don't reach for it. Meaning justifying this cop murdering Philando Castillo. So I responded. Because to me, again, I'm not going to get too deep in this video, you all. I just want to do this introductory, saying where we're going to go with this talk, why we're talking about it. Because here was a lady that had a white point of view. She didn't have no regard. She mentioned not one regard for that man who was unarmed. To forget the fact that whatever this cop thought, he was wrong and murdered a good man. He shot into a car with his 6-year-old daughter at the time. He shot in the car. murdered their father in front of the 4-year-old daughter. Now, one of the criticisms that I receive oftentimes is people say I'm stoking race. I want to get to that statement, but see, that's code for we don't want to hear about your race talk. Shut up talking about race. I won't talk about it. But when this dear sister brought that up and didn't mention not one, and I ended up saying that to her, he shot into a car. And by the way, he was wrong. Not that he was. Now, the sniper was wrong. Popped his court, killed cops, and he got killed for it. But Philando Castile didn't do anything. Where is the empathy? Now, I'm saying all of this not to ramble, but again, this is where we're going to go with this. This is why I want to talk about it, because I was surprised that as a Christian, I expect you to see things as a Christian. If you disagree with reparations, tell me that from a biblical standpoint, not from your white point of view. See, this whole issue now, think about this, the Confederate flag. You got Christians that think, hey, the Confederacy was okay. The South was wrong. You know? I mean, all of these racial things that are still going on. They hate Black Lives Matter, but say absolutely nothing about that. All the time you have statues of the Confederacy. Now, again, all of these things is why we need to talk about, have an honest discussion on race. Where did these thoughts come from? And you're going to be surprised. See how America was conditioned to think about race. Let me leave you with this thought. And this is where we're going to pick up with this. How does America, the Christian nation, with freedom as banner on their door, who says we believe that all men are created equal and granted inalienable rights by their Creator, how do you then turn around and you enslave a particular race of people? How do you think that that's okay? How is it that we had to fight a bloody war to end it? In other words, we just didn't, we're wrong. We fought a bloody war to end it. And then you had another 100 years of Jim Crow segregation, where there was another bloody fight of struggle and protest to end Jim Crow, to effectively end racism. And then, just keep this in mind, that didn't change the hearts of some. It didn't change the hearts of some. Because right now, to this day, there are people who still think the same way. And that's what we're going to be discussing, you all. We're going to be discussing that. We're going to get into the whole nature of slavery. How do you enslave? What did it take to slave someone? Why is that okay in your mind? See, how does America think about this? Why was that okay? And more so, how is it that major Christian institutions, such as the Assemblies of God, Bob Jones University, the Southern Baptist, and others, every denomination split over the issue of slavery? How does that exist how do you proclaim Christ with that? That's what we want to get into. The mindset, see. We want to go deep into this racism and say, how does this exist? All right, guys, look, that is my perspective for the day. We're going to go deep into this subject. But don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to PP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section. And I welcome the dialogue, and we will dialogue. Let me just say this one thing. I know I'm signing off here, but look, I'm taping this because I haven't figured out how to do a YouTube live. But like I say, I want to have an honest discussion. So I welcome your comments. Add it below. Look, till next time, I'll see you then.